Welcome to Mommy Heal Thyself. We feature guests who provide you with the tools, resources, and strategies you need to say no to a life of pain and suffering from all forms of preventable disease, toxic drugs, and unnecessary surgeries. We hope to inspire you to boldly reclaim your ability to heal and to serve the ones you love.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mommy Heal Thyself. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Kirsten Samuel. She is a Christ-centered coach, author, and speaker who empowers women blindsided by a spouse's porn use to find peace, confidence, and hope in Christ. A certified coach through the International Christian Coaching Institute and a former school administrator. She brings both professional insight and personal experience to her work. Kirsten is the author of Choosing a Way Out, When the Bottom Isn't the Bottom, sharing how God met her in her darkest season and restored what felt beyond repair. An international speaker and advocate for women healing from betrayal, she speaks with deep compassion and a gentle truth. Wife to Dave, mother of 3, and grandmother of 15, Kirsten's heart is to remind women they are deeply loved, have God-given worth, and that healing is always possible. So, thank you so much, Kirsten, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, this is a very, in some ways, heavy topic for us to discuss, and very necessary topic for us to discuss because of the world that we live in. And I don't think that many people are really aware of how prevalent porn addiction is. And so I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what led you to this point of deciding that you wanted to help women in this situation. And have you noticed a significant increase in the women who are dealing with this? What are the stats that you are aware of, perhaps?
Sure. Yes, it's a very difficult topic that no one really wants to talk about, or very few. There are now more that are talking about it, and I'm very grateful for that. But yes, the statistics are that approximately 2/3 of divorces in the United States cite pornography as one of the top reasons.
Wow.
And that's from a survey of attorneys. So that is, and that statistic is almost 10 years old now. So that tells us that this is a very prevalent problem. Recent statistic I saw on fightthenewdrug.org, which is an education site focused on educating people about the effects of pornography and how can you, break free from that, says that it could be as high as 96% of men or young men are exposed or using pornography on a regular basis. Now, the regular basis is not defined
Fine.
real clearly, but they would identify as using it regularly. It's not just men, though. Now the statistics are showing that women are climbing and is now over 50% of young
Wow.
women. So this is a prevalent, rampant issue in our society, and it really came to head during the pandemic, the recent COVID pandemic, where you saw, I'm sure, Dr. Michelle, the rise in mental health issues.
Mhm.
And this was part of it. As we're starting to see some statistics now come out, this was a very real thing. Yes, I am seeing more women who are raising their hand and saying, I need help. However, a lot of women are still really bound in shame
Yeah.
because they discover this, they don't know what to do. And so they may speak to a family member or they may speak to a friend and they hear some responses that really are not helpful, such as, well, all men do it. You
Mhm.
just have to put up with it.
Yeah.
You know, well, or if you were a better wife, he wouldn't be looking at porn. That's a good one.
That's a hard one.
Um, it's a hard one. Or you just don't have enough faith.
Hmm.
Some women will go to their pastor, they will go to a spiritual leader, and they will be told, well, you just don't have enough faith. And again, it goes back to you're not being a good enough wife. Maybe you're not giving him enough sex,
Mm-hmm.
which completely denies the root of an any kind of an addiction. It's not helping the person who is struggling with that addiction, whether it's male or female.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I want women to hear from me is there's hope. This does not have to, these are not true statements. And we can find the truth here. And you asked, how did I get into it? Well, it's my story. And you know that I firmly believe, as a faith-based coach, that God takes the most difficult things in our lives and he allows us, not only does he bring us through them and heal us through them if we'll go through that work, but then he allows us to reach out to others and say, I can walk that path with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did about 10 years ago with me when he said, it's time to tell your story. And I did not want to.
So tell us your story.
Well, I am married to a very wonderful man. And in 2007, we had just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. Our daughter had gotten married. Our oldest child had just gotten married. And my husband came home from work and told me that he was very likely going to lose his job the next day. And I was, one, very shocked because he had been at this company for many, many years and was doing really well, loved what he was doing. You know, things were going really well. And I said, well, I asked the question, why?
Yeah.
And he told me because of a moral failure. And my knees just buckled. Um, to to see my husband at that point, very kind, very gentle man, very concerned about people, very tuned in. I tell young moms all the time, you know, I always dreamed of having that moment when you tell, you know, that you're pregnant to your husband. You know, plan that out. How was I going to do it? Well, he knew I was pregnant before I did. That's how in tune he is as a man.
Wow.
So I was completely blindsided. I did not have any idea. And that took us on a journey of, he said, I have to come up with a plan because the company that he worked for, this was like a no tolerance policy
Yeah.
in their handbook.
It's good.
Um, yeah, yeah, not all companies have it, but this one did.
Especially
And
way back then. So, I mean, that's
yes,
tremendous. Yeah.
yeah. And so he said, I have no idea what to do. Well, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even breathe at that moment. I couldn't even look at him. And through a series of events that I believe were God ordained in our lives, he brought people to us. Put a name in my head right away. And I said, we need help. I don't know what to do. We need help. I want to call Kathy, one of my friends. I knew Kathy. She had a counseling background. And I thought, at least I can talk to someone to know that what I'm hearing right now, I'm not crazy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she and her husband actually agreed to meet with us in about 30 minutes. And this was in the evening. So we met with them, and the very first thing they said to us was, this does not have to be fatal. However, things have to change.
Yeah.
And they helped us, you know, give us some suggestions on what he could present to his company. The next day, he also met for breakfast with a gentleman that we had known for 15 years at that time. And he literally on a napkin, the famous napkin story, our napkin story is that on this napkin, this gentleman, Peter, laid out a recovery plan
Hmm.
for my husband and for me.
Wow.
So here my husband has from breakfast, walks into this meeting and says, here's a recovery plan. And the
Mhm.
company accepted that, and that set us on a journey of recovery. But what I didn't know was that the secrets that I had been carrying were about to be completely exposed.
Woo. Oh my goodness. So then what was the secret?
Well, I had been sexually assaulted as a child, and I had never told anyone. And so what happened was when we went into, and part of what we had to do was some mandated marriage counseling, which I think that was, I'm so thankful for that, that we
Mhm.
went through intensive marriage counseling as part of this recovery program. And in that recovery, I found out that I had suicidal depression, PTSD, and an anxiety disorder.
Whoa.
And as we dug into it, it probably had roots back in that abuse that I had kept hidden. I had never said anything about.
Hmm.
And so that began another journey. Not only were we, my husband having to deal with the root of his pornography addiction, and then the destruction to our marriage, the relationship was completely broken. But now here I'm dealing with the suicidal depression and the PTSD and the anxiety disorder. And so I had to start digging into what was going on, what were the lies that I was believing about myself, the lies that I was believing about how I was supposed to live my life, and all of the false expectations that were continually being broken,
Hmm.
which continually contributed to my anxiety and the way that I was viewing life.
Mm.
So we were a hot mess. That's the only way I can say
I mean, that's beyond hot mess, Kristen. I mean,
it.
I don't know what kind of how you define hot mess, but that's like way beyond my version of hot mess.
Well, maybe we
I
call it a
mean,
train wreck.
perhaps so. But I mean, what is beautiful to me is that you got through it.
Yeah,
And so that's what this story is about. That's what
yes.
you being here with us is about. How do we get through this? How do we get to the other side where you're able to speak about this with that peace and that freedom, not only for yourself, but also with an apparent love for your husband? So obviously, something happened between then and now
Hmm.
to help you in that healing process. So tell us a little bit more about.
Well, I what I what I use with my coaching clients now is really the process that we went through. And I have distilled it down to three words that are very easy to remember. I call it the aftershock recovery method because it felt like I was riding an earthquake for so many months. You know, the initial 8.3 whatever earthquake hit at the revelation, but then the shocks kept coming. And then I got my diagnoses, and there were more and more shocks, and I felt like I could never get on my feet again. So the three things that I learned in this process can be distilled down to three words: stop, listen, do. Now, so the stop part of it is I literally had to physically stop. I was just pushing like a bull heading toward that red flag. I was just everything in my life was just keep going. If you
Yeah.
can't stop, you can't stop. And what I had to learn was I had to stop. I had to give myself, I had to sit in the pain.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, first of all, I had to name it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to acknowledge it. I had to name it. I had to sit in it because my body was carrying all of that pain,
Mm-hmm.
which that was contributing to the depression and the
Yeah,
PTSD
absolutely.
and the anxiety. And I'm sure you're familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I started reading that book and I went, oh my goodness, yeah, I've lived this, you know. So the first thing was to stop. I had to stop listening to things that were not helping me find the way through.
Mm,
Like people who came alongside me and said, "Oh, it's okay. Just keep going. It'll just take care of itself."
mhm.
No, it won't.
Exactly.
I had to stop seeking affirmation about my worth from anybody but God. I had to stop condemning my husband for what he did, which was bad. It was horrible. I described it as he stuck a dagger in my heart and he kept turning it.
Mm,
That was the level of pain.
mm.
And he knew it, but he had to go on his own journey. So I had to stop
Exactly.
managing him.
Exactly.
And I had to recognize that the only person I could manage was me.
Mm.
And I was not doing a very good job. So I had to stop inputs. I had to stop managing other things. I had to stop believing lies that I had been believing all my life. I had to really step back and look at absolutely everything. Now, I did this with the help of counselors and with the help of coaches. And they, we found them and they walked us through this. The second part of this was I had to listen. I had to listen to the words I was using about
Mm,
myself, about my husband. I had to listen to how I described what had happened. Now, when I told you about this, I described it in more in a third person. I
mhm.
didn't, I didn't own all of this when I
Yeah.
was describing it to you. At that point, I was owning everything. It was all my fault. I was internalizing absolutely everything that happened. Even my husband's decisions that led him to this pornography somehow was my fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to quit. So I had to listen to my own words.
Hmm.
I had to listen very carefully and I had to learn critical listening to what people were saying to me.
Hmm.
What's true, what's not true, you know? And my standard for that, Dr. Michelle, became the Bible. If it didn't line up with my what I was reading in the Bible, then forget it. I just let it go.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then I had to listen to what God was telling me. When I was reading the Bible, what was he saying about who I am? And then the do is the natural out product of that. It is, okay, now that you have identified these things and now that you have begun to see the pieces of truth here, now how do you walk that out?
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Because we can know a lot of stuff in our heads, but until it becomes a part of our practice, we have not grown, we have not changed, and we have not allowed our brains to remap life. And there's still times today that I'll say something and I go, "Whoa, wait a minute.
Where did that come from?
That is not
That is not
true."
me. Exactly. Exactly.
And so one of my coaches said that everything starts in our thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
Romans
believe.
12:2 tells us to transform our minds, our
Mm-hmm.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So our thoughts determine our beliefs, which determine our words, which determine our actions, which determine our outcomes. So if
Exactly.
I wanted to have this life that was free, that was fun, that was adventurous, that was fulfilling, that was everything I ever dreamed as a little girl that I wanted in my life, I had to start with my thoughts.
Yeah.
That was a hard journey. That's been a hard journey.
I love that you emphasize that. And, when I work with people myself, that's where we begin. And people don't want to deal with that because it is so much harder to work on that than it is to work on the physical stuff. I tell people all the time, the physical part of healing is actually the easiest part, but it is dependent upon the foundation that starts with our beliefs, our thoughts, our emotions.
Hmm.
So it is amazing that you were able to connect that with what we look at as simply being a fault of weakness of an individual and recognizing that there's so many other layers beneath it. not only for the person who is the addict, and this is an addiction, and when I say it's an addiction, I'm not just saying the word because it sounds fun, fuzzy or whatever, but it is an addiction
Mhm.
because it affects your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of your being. And people don't realize that pornography actually affects physiologically the individual from the production of neurotransmitters
Mhm.
and the production of various hormones that are triggered by this addiction, just like all the other addictions, those
Mhm.
pathways in the brain. So, what I'm looking at right now is how do we move forward? I know we have those 3 steps of stop, listen, and do, but there's a part of me that says that there's something that comes before that. There is
There
something
is.
that 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 helped you to open the way to realize that you needed to do these 3 steps. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. No,
If that makes sense.
and you are right. Um, for me, what had to happen was I had to acknowledge the truth of what was going on.
Mm,
Because, like you said, we don't want to go there.
mm, mm.
It's much easier. I had 2 steps out the door.
That's the easier way, I tell you.
It was like, you're out of, I'm out of
See ya.
here.
Mm-hmm,
I'm taking the
mm-hmm,
keys. I'm driving the car. And when I run out of gas, I'll stop.
mm-hmm.
But I'm not
Maybe.
coming back. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But I'm not coming back.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and and because it was easier for me to run than it was to sit in the pain, to
mm-hmm.
stay. So that's why my book is called Choosing a Way Out. It was a choice.
Conscious, deliberate.
It was a deliberate choice to believe that there could be a different outcome in this story.
Mm,
It was a choice with my depression to believe that I didn't have to be defined by my depression. And I can distinctly remember the day that I thought about taking my own life,
mm.
and almost did it. And in that moment, I had that choice. And so many times, what I find and what I want women to hear is you have always a choice.
Mhm.
You are not you are not condemned to your current circumstances,
Of course
whatever
not.
they are. I can tell this story today because it's part of who I am. And is it the best part of who I am? Absolutely not. But if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Mhm.
Now, this outcome could have had a very different
Look,
storyline
that's true. That is true.
because there's a choice.
Hmm.
And that's the thing about choices. My husband could have made a different choice than he made. He could have looked at me and said, "It's all in your mind. I don't know why you're making such a big deal about this. It's not that big a deal. No, I'm not addicted. You know, this is, I don't do it every day, so it's not that big a deal. Um, I still love you. I've not mistreated you. I've not blah blah." And he hadn't, none of that. Like I said, my husband, I told you what he's like. He was
Hmm.
like this while he was addicted to pornography, which is what was so hard for me to grab
Yeah,
because it
it
was
doesn't even,
incongruent.
yeah, it doesn't compute at all with the image that we have when we think of someone who is quote unquote into porn, you know.
Right. So, yeah, I had all these incongruent things going on. And I remember the day that I got to the point where I said, either God is who he says he is and he's able to get me through this, or he's not. And if he's not, there's no point in me living because I don't want to live this way. I'm done.
Yeah.
And I literally said, I'm done. And
Wow.
that was my turning point. So I had to acknowledge all of it. I had to acknowledge the fact that I had been sexually assaulted twice as a child.
Mhm.
I had to acknowledge that the life that I thought I had, I didn't. I had to acknowledge what my husband had done. I had to acknowledge what I had been covering up for so many years and what that had done to me. I had to acknowledge that I didn't want to live. And in uh, The Body Keeps the Score, that's one of the things that Dr. Vanderkolk says is you have to be willing to feel the feels, is the way
Yes.
I interpret it.
Yeah.
So that was what came before this stop, listen, and do, because it wasn't until I could fully say, this is the truth of what has been going on. This is the stuff that if I tell you, you're going to hate me and walk away from me, and I'm going to be rejected, which is just going to confirm that I have no value, I have no worth, I am not significant, I am throwaway.
Mm.
And the fear of doing that was enormous.
Well, my dear Kirsten, as we bring things to a close today, what is the one message that you would like to leave our audience with, or what is something that we haven't touched on that you think is absolutely essential for them to understand before we end?
You are eternally significant, no matter what the story of your past. Right up until the moment you're listening at this, I don't care what the story is. You are significant. Your pain is real, but it doesn't have to be the rest of your story. You have choices. There's no shame in it, not at all. There's no judgment from me, anyway. I don't know from anybody else, but there's none from me.
Mhm.
And I know that you can live a full, fulfilled, freedom-filled life if you're willing to make that choice.
Amen. Now, I know that you have a free guide that can be helpful to
Right.
our women. And even if this is not your particular story, I guarantee that there's probably someone in your network that
Mhm.
has this story and that can benefit from this particular episode of our podcast and the guide that Kirsten is going to share with us. Can you tell us a little bit about that guide?
It's called Five Steps to Calm Yourself After Marriage Betrayal. And it literally is five things you can do in 5 minutes. I mean, it's just, and the very first one is going to sound so crazy, but
Uh-huh.
Dr. Michelle, you're familiar with this, is you have to take a breath. You have to
Yes,
breathe.
breathe. That's the first step
It's
always.
the
Have to
very
breathe.
first step because when we're panicked, when we are feeling that anxiety, we hold our breath.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we hold our breath, our brain can't think. It can't function. Our systems don't function. So the very first step in that literally is I want you to take a deep breath. Breathe in, breathe out, and do that until you feel yourself calming, which you know is part of a grounding exercise. So it's a
Exactly.
very simple thing. The third step in it is you need to tell someone,
Mm.
and that might be your friend. That one friend, I call them 3 a.m. friends. You can call them at any time and they're like, I got you. I got you, girl. I got you. So you need to call and you don't have to be profound. All you need to say is, I'm not okay right now. Something along that, or I need help. Sometimes the word is help.
Yeah, plain and simple, four-letter word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that 3 a.m. friend gets it. And then the fifth step of those five steps is get some professional help. This
Mm.
is not going to go away on its own. You can't push it aside and just say, I'm going to bulldog my way through this, baby. It's going to come back if you will get the help. that you need from a professional who specializes in this area, you will be free.
So everyone, at the show notes, in the show notes, we will have the links to the guide and to be able to connect with Kirsten, because as she says, you need that 4-letter word, help. There is no shame in this game. There is no weakness. It is actually a sign of strength and courage to be able to say, I need some help. And as the song goes, we all need some help at some point in our journey.
Mm-hmm.
So until next time, peace and blessings. Yay.
Thank you for tuning in for this episode of Mommy Heal Thyself. If you like what we're doing here, please share, subscribe, like us, and leave a comment. Your feedback is very much appreciated.